So for today's forum, our first topic for discussion is titled The X Factor in a Virtual Classroom, Practices That Work.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Krista. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, students. And good morning, friends. This is a very special day for me, not only because this is my first time to be here in UP Open University. I know that this place was established, constructed many, many years ago before the pandemic, but I never had the chance really to visit the campus. So this is very, very special for me. And more than that, this is very special for me too, because this is my first time to meet my friends, my virtual friends on the email, especially Ma'am Tess. Doc Tess has been my phone pal, my email friend. We have been exchanging communication with each other, and this is my first time to meet her. And I couldn't help but really hug her when I saw her. Totoong tao pala si Ma'am Tess. And then to my well-loved partner in my teaching here in UPOU. And without her, I wouldn't have been able to manage my 2 trimesters, the past 2 trimesters. She continues to help me. This is my 3rd trimester now with UPOU. Krista Fama. Thank you very much, Krista. So, frankly, I don't know how I got this assignment to deliver a talk on continuing quality online modality. Wow, that says a lot. For one, I must admit that as far as technological advancements are concerned, I belong to the Paleolithic age. I should have been introduced by Krista as a dinosaur living in the 21st century. Frankly, that's what I am. To tell you the truth, with the initial onslaught of the virus in 2020, I was paralyzed. I am not exaggerating. I'm not being dramatic by saying that I really was paralyzed. The challenges of the virtual classroom seemed to drain us of the last drop of creativity and resourcefulness that we had in our mental and physical reservoir as teachers of the university. In retrospect, I could only be grateful that I survived the most trying times of my 5 decades of being a UP teacher. That was my first time to encounter those very, very big challenges. Prior to the pandemic, I managed to balance my time as a teacher, as a researcher, as an extension worker. I was everywhere. And it was nothing. I was just enjoying myself doing all of those things, even to the point of earning some recognition from the university and from professional organizations for the service I was happily rendering. But 2020 was something really different. I now look back and reflect on my experiences in a virtual classroom, if only to share with you practices that could lead to quality online delivery of instruction. In a forum that we had last trimester, I also mentioned some of the activities I did in my classroom, which for me seemed to work. This time, I also hope to learn from each one of you. I'm not just going to share my experiences. I hope to learn from each one of you present in this room with me right now. This way, we could, to quote a line from Hamlet, take arms against a sea of troubles. Those of you who are familiar with this work of Shakespeare, that's part of the famous soliloquy, To Be or Not to Be. How do we take arms against a sea of troubles? This means we have to find our way. We have to find ways to calm the sea. We are in a troubled sea, but we have to find our way. By the way, I should mention that I was reminded of this part of Hamlet's soliloquy because I chanced upon a recent book published, authored by Harold Bloom, and it went by the title, Take Arms Against a Sea of Troubles. So how am I, myself, going to manage this sea of troubles? Number one, prepare for the voyage. This is a sea of troubles. We have to prepare ourselves adequately for the voyage. Do the preliminaries. We have to prepare for our voyage. And how do we do that? A well thought out course guide is essential in preparing for the voyage. Before the pandemic, my teaching assignment was always on a semestral basis. Almost 50 years. It was always semestral basis, which meant it allowed for 48 hours or 32 class meetings of 1.5 hours per class meeting. And that time of the time allocation of 48 hours, you can spread that over 16 weeks of a semester. 16 weeks constituted a regular semester. But when I came back to OU, and I said I came back, I taught in OU in the 1990s. I was teaching English 262 and English 157 with UPOU before. So when I came back during the first trimester of this academic year, I had to adjust my English 12 assignment that we were using in UP Diliman because that was based on a semestral schedule and UPOU was on a trimestral term. 12 weeks against 16 weeks. That's a lot. You have to subtract 4 weeks from the original plan of 16 weeks. The principle of adhering to the MELCs, I wonder if you are familiar with the term MELCs. This means the most essential learning competencies. We only had to stick to the MELCs. Never mind the burloloys that you want to teach your kids. Stick to the most essential learning competencies. I had to navigate my way through my course to determine which were most essential. These MELCs were given priority in the preparation of the syllabus. Moreover, the delivery of instruction through the distance mode was emphasized. Following the approved English 12 being offered by UP Diliman, I could not deviate from that because that was officially approved all the way up, University Council, all the way up. We had to have it approved by the administration. So I prepared my own course pack based on the original. The course pack consisted of a course guide and a course overview. In UP Diliman, the course pack would have the course guide and the modules. In addition to those, I prepared an additional document, which I called the course overview. The course guide lists course specifics, the course number, the course title, the course description, the course learning outcomes in relation to the GE program objectives. Because English 12, apart from being an academic course, it's also part of the GE program. The course guide also contained a course outline, which was organized into modules for a more systematic delivery of topics. Reference materials were also included, and of course, the course requirements. On the other hand, I also had the course overview. On top of the course guide, the course overview was given out also at the beginning of the term. The course overview contains a summary of the entire course in grid form. So for easy reference, it was very easy to look at it because it was in chart form. It presents the whole course literally at a glance, just like a roadmap. The course overview lists the modules and the topics to be covered per week and the expected output and deadline for submission of the written outputs also indicated on that course overview. So at a glance, the students know exactly where they would be for the week. So 12 weeks divided into all of these topics we have and a course output for the modules with an accompanying deadline for each. Next, organize the course proper. How do we do that? Do things systematically. For example, I requested the students to attend the orientation session. At that time, I did not know if I was in violation of any practice or protocol in UPOU, but I dared to invite my students to an orientation session in real time. It was our first virtual session. It was not a requirement because that is a policy of the UPOU. The real-time encounters with the students cannot be a requirement in real time. So what I did was to record so that those who could not attend the orientation session could at least listen to what transpired during the orientation session. Surprisingly, more than 50% and attended this class meeting, the orientation. So the recording was made available to everybody after that orientation session. That session had the following objectives. Number one, to get to know one another, that we were a real class. I realized before that I was talking to a screen, a very cold screen. And for me as a teacher, it's not very easy to do that. Especially, and you saw it earlier, we only had names of attendees against a black background. For me, the first time I opened my laptop and held my class, I felt like I was inside a catacomb. Very creepy, with all the names there plastered against the black background. There were no faces, and I was talking to a very cold screen. So the orientation session was intended to minimize that kind of feeling, for my part, for one, and for the students too, because then we got to know each other. There are real people behind the screen. We all exist. Number two, second objective is to discuss the course coverage or the course outline. Very important for the students. What are they getting themselves into? What do they expect to get from the course? Number three, to prepare for the course requirements. Of course, it's not all chit-chat going on in the classroom. They have to submit something at the end of the semester or within the semester. So it's also to introduce them to what I expect of them, okay? So number four, to familiarize oneself with classroom policies. That was when I told them, okay, if you are going to attend my sessions, you can just eat your popcorn behind the screen. I won't even see you do that. So we are having this session now. You can drink your coffee. It's okay. No problem with that. So classroom policies were clarified, especially what I am requiring them to do in class. The fifth objective, to organize the class into groups for the group discussions. Reality in UPOU is that we have very big classes. There is no way really to manage that big class size except if we handle them in smaller groups. So to prepare for grouping, the orientation session was very important to us. And lastly, to arrange for consultations. If they need my help along the way, I gave them my schedule. I gave them my schedule throughout the week, regardless of the date. I was holding consultations even on Sundays. And I didn't mind that because that was the only free time they had. I had other free days during the week. So what's giving up a Sunday for? It wouldn't really cost me too much to give more time to my students. The orientation session allowed me to get to know the students. The students also got to know each other. The first time I ever held the orientation session, when their names started appearing on screen, you could hear voices in the background. Uy, nandito ka din. Uy, kumusta ka na? And there was a lot of chika moment, during that orientation session. They were just so happy, to see each other, if only for the names on screen. They were in my course together. And so, if we were to make this class work, the students knew that we were together in the undertaking, that we should share responsibilities in achieving our goals. I specifically instructed the old students in the program to help the freshies, the new enrollees in the program. I think Jaime was in that class. I was asking the kuyas and the ates, help the new ones, help the new, the freshies in the class. They're not used to the system yet, so you play the role of kuya or ate to them. That orientation session also gave me enough time to conduct a mini class session, similar to a lecture demo. So at least they know who their teacher is. This is my method of teaching. If it were not for the pandemic, this would be how I would be teaching the course. They got to know me. They got to know my language, the language I would be using in class. So in effect, it was my way of introducing myself to them without having to formally say, I am your teacher for the course and these are my qualifications. Never mind that. They got a first-hand experience, in listening to their teacher for the first time. It was also my way of telling them indirectly my expectations from each one of them. In my second trimester with UPOU, the students who attended the orientation session asked for regular discussion sessions to enable them to share their insights with their classmates. Nawili, because they were hearing me speaking during the class time and they wanted to interrupt sometimes, they wanted to share insights. So after that orientation session, I never intended it really to be a regular thing for us. But the students were the ones who were asking me, Ma'am, pwedeng ulitin natin? Can we have more of this? Even with a small group lang. So the class agreed to have the regular sessions on a weekly basis. We were recording all the sessions for the sake of those who would not be able to attend or who would like to find out what happened during the encounter. So parang there is a virtual classroom existing out there. And this was the virtual classroom. This was how it was going, even with a very small group. And the others were using that as reference material all throughout the semester. They were listening to the recorded sessions. Ganun pala. That's how it works. Meanwhile, the classroom requirements were planned in such a way that there was a healthy balance between the individual papers and group requirements. It wouldn't be fair to everybody if the grades were just based on group submissions. The first trimester, I had 77 students. Uh, I thought that was already very difficult to handle because in UP Diliman, my virtual classes only had 15 students. I was practically doing a one-on-one tutoring with my Diliman students. Lahat ng klase, we only had 15 students. It was very easy to handle. And then here comes UPOU with 77 students for my first experience with them after the pandemic. The individual papers and the group requirements worked well. Thus, some students who felt that they preferred to work alone, merong mga introvert, they really would prefer to work alone, they had the chance to prove their competence through the individual submissions. At the same time, most of the students felt more motivated when they worked in groups. I was surprised when I found this out at the end of the semester. They were doing their evaluation. Working in groups, for them, it provided working in groups provided them a healthy opportunity for social interaction. They were so hungry for social interaction because they were limited, restricted to their laptops, no, to the iPads. This time there was real social interaction in groups, and they were getting moral support from their peers. Hindi sila nag-iisa. One student, this was very recent, she emailed me and admitted that there was a point when she had planned on dropping the course, but her group mates convinced her to finish the course. A lot of pep talk from the group mates, kaya mo yan. She was happy she stayed. For those who encountered problems with group interaction and collaborative output, I kept my communication lines open to them. We threshed out problem via Zoom or even phone calls. A teacher who requires submissions from her or his students has the obligation and the responsibility to let the students know the results of their efforts. I was pleasantly surprised to receive a string of thank you messages from my students at the end of the semester, expressing their appreciation for the comments that I wrote on their papers. One student, I think she was about to graduate, even sent me an email saying, "Ma'am, this is the first time I ever received feedback for my work." Ano? You're graduating and it's your first time. Baka naman di mo binubuksan email mo. Anyway, I made sure, for this purpose, I made sure that the papers were promptly returned to them with my comments and suggestions. I set a deadline for myself to finish checking all their papers within a week of their submission. Before the next paper was submitted, the earlier paper should have been given back to them so that they could learn from their mistakes. I print out every page of every submission. I comment on the papers. I take screenshots of their papers, every page of it, and send them back to them as soon as I have finished checking their papers. Some of them wrote back to me to tell me that they only realized that they need to attend to some specific areas of improvement only upon reading my comments on their papers. All through the years, they were not aware of it. And then they saw it there. Oh, you have problem with your prepositions. You have problems with your subject and verb agreement. They never realized that. Anyway, for some of them, it was not often that they receive feedback from their teachers. Throughout the term, I was alternately receiving individual papers and group papers. The group papers gave me a chance to read fewer pages. The secret is out. The individual papers, I had 77 students, 77 papers yan each time. Mabuti kung one page. Some of them would submit 3 pages, 5 pages. And it really pains me, no, to set a page limit to the papers because sometimes they have really good ideas to share. So I would allow them, sige lang, submit. I punish myself checking more pages. But anyway, I enjoy reading the papers naman. So the group papers last trimester really worked, especially since I handled a class this time of 255 students. That was my second semester. From 77, I was promoted to 255. This regular exchange of papers between my students and me had its benefits. On the part of the students, they were able to track their progress in my course. I was also taking careful note of students who were not submitting their papers on time. A few even stopped submitting before the middle of the trimester. I was emailing each one of them when I did not receive the paper on due date. After 1 week, I emailed them personally. Some of them told me, those who did not submit it to the deadline, told me that they did not make it to the deadline for filing a leave of absence. They had actually intended to go on leave, but they did not make it to the deadline, kaya pala hindi na nagsasubmit. So, yon. The submissions were programmed based on the level of difficulty. The easier ones, of course, came at the beginning of the term. Later submissions became more and more complex and required more time to process. The individual paper helped build the students' self-confidence. They cannot depend on anyone. They were on their own. It gave them a chance to engage in self-reflection and self-development. The group paper, on the other hand, trained the students in sharing responsibilities with their peers. They also learned new ideas from their group mates. Many of them were emailing me about it. Ang galing pala ma'am ng group mates ko. Ibang-iba yung interpretation ko, ibang-iba yung perspective nila. And I love those very spontaneous feedback. The students practiced peer evaluation and self-evaluation as well when they conduct group discussions. Now, finally, this is almost the end of the trimester. With the harbor in sight, remember we are on a voyage. The harbor is now in sight. We have to prepare the class for disembarkation. Conduct a synthesis session, oral or written. Last trimester, I called this final session a postscript to English 11, a postscript to our course. So what is it that you still have to say? Was there anything that I failed to discuss with you, which the course failed to offer you throughout the trimester? Those were their postscripts. This activity synthesizes the students' learning from the course. The students wrote about their thoughts about the course. I received spontaneous and helpful feedback from them. At the same time, this final activity allowed them to reflect on their encounter with literature. It was a fitting closure to our course. Now, the next slide shows how the course was organized. On screen, you will see the four major components, no? So I would like to just give you a little time. That was what I talked about earlier. orientation sessions, there were discussions, there were paper submissions, and then the synthesis session. Looks very easy. If you look at it, very simple. But things are not all that easy to achieve. Every step of the way, you have to put in a lot of effort. There were challenges. I tell you, there were challenges along the way. The biggest challenge I faced was with the nature and background of the UPOU students. A big number of the UPOU students are working students. Hence, well, at least in my class, hence, they juggle their time between their full-time or part-time jobs and their studies. Last trimester, some of my students experienced changes in their work shifts. Ma'am, dati pang umaga ako, bigla akong ginawang panggabi. Hala, okay. Some of them experienced changes in their work sites, and they were not working from home. They were reporting to their offices. So travel time, nawala. Some of them even experienced changes in their work responsibilities. The job descriptions changed. So they were having all of those different challenges in their own lives, resulting in their having to drop or neglect their enrollment in my subject. That's reality of UPOU. Some of my students are actually breadwinners or are parents in households that do not have the luxury of assistance from house helps, nannies, and others. It is even possible that some of them are actually nannies to their employers' children. I had some of them in my class. One challenge to our synchronous meetings was the difference in time zone. Group discussions were not always smooth for this reason. Ang hirap po mag-schedule ng group discussions. It might surprise some of you if I say, no, at this point, that even the free tuition policy, in a way, could create a problem for our classroom. I couldn't help thinking that free tuition could discourage the students from committing themselves to completing and earning credit for every course they enroll for. The percentage of dropping before and after the implementation of the policy might be worth looking into. Paying tuition fees using your own money could push the students to do their best because of their financial investment for every course that they take. Many of you might want to add class size, especially since we are on a trimestral term. Maybe if this were a 16-week semester, I would find it a lot easier to handle even 255 students, but only 12 weeks, no? And the class size was 255 in 12 weeks. While this may really pose some challenges, especially when it comes to evaluating the student submissions, I admit that I have learned to accept this as a given in the UPOU setting. Yun yung condition. I have to work within those conditions. I still continue to dream, though, that someday the classes will not be that big. So, how do we, quote, take arms against a sea of troubles, unquote? We can effectively address these areas for improvement by attending to the following. First, we can examine the profile of students that will include information on their status as students. Are they full-time or part-time students? I started my trimester, this trimester, by asking them that question. Many of them are actually, happily for me, full-time students. Where is their place of residence? Are they in the Philippines or abroad? Because if they are abroad, then you have to consider the time zone. They are in a different time zone. What is their year level? Are they freshies? Are they graduating students, etc.? So I also wanted to know an alternative contact detail for each one of them, in addition to the email address that we find in the portal. I found out that I had a student who was not even checking the UPOU portal for announcements because she thought she did not need to do it since she believed she was not officially enrolled for the trimester. Another student, on the other hand, lost her access to the course. She lost her cell phone last week. And she only happened to get in touch with me through one of her classmates whose phone number she knew. So through the grapevine, she was able to get in touch with me again. I don't know how she lost contact with her own access to the portal. She did not remember her password or something. Uh, anyway, uh, those are real problems, no, that I face in my class. So we have to know more about the students that we have in class. Get a profile of the students. Second, we can make some adjustments to the standard course guide to fit the needs, interests, and circumstances of the students. This does not mean that you are going to change your syllabus and minimize requirements. No, I'm not compromising the requirements for the course, not the standards of UP. It's just that you have to adjust deadlines, maybe juggle a little of the syllabus to suit their circumstances. For example, this trimester, I decided that right after taking the short story, I was not going to go to extended fiction or the novel right after. I should. Logically, the novel follows the short story. But then the students will not have time to read one novel that I'm requiring them to read. So I had to juggle my syllabus a bit, push down that requirement for the novel a little later in the trimester, push up the other requirements, so that the students will have more time to savor reading the novel that I require them to read. That kind of adjustment. Third, grouping can conform to the student's preference, possibly guided by their personal convenience. Plan for alternate submissions of individual papers and group papers can be made. So, this trimester, again, one student volunteered to help me out with the groupings. I told him to put together all the graduating students, and preferably in the same course. If they're enrolled for the same program, it would be easier for them to get in touch with each other because they're also classmates in other courses. So graduating students, put them together because their grades have to be submitted earlier than the others. Their grades have to be there on time. So at least you can attend to them, pay attention to these graduating students who will be needing the grades earlier than the rest. The freshies, put them together. Of course, they can have a kuya, ate, to guide them. So you can put also one of the junior students or the older ones together with the freshies so that they can be guided too. So there are ways of really grouping the students. And all of this really require a little time, to process, but you come up with very good groups. Now, the alternate submissions of individual papers and group papers. What I did was, there was an equal number of individual papers and group papers. Para the individual efforts will be given equal credit, no? Credit equal to the group paper credit, the grade. So I alternate between individual and group. As I said, maybe at this point, I will be needing my visual aid right there at below the table. You will see these were individual submissions for one trimester. These were the individual submissions. Back to back po ito. This was my very first trimester, 77 students, individual submissions. So these were the 77 student submissions, individual, back to back po lahat. And for the 255 students, this was what it turned out as individual. These were the group submissions. You can see the proportion. They were they were very comprehensive discussions, but you can see that with the group, they're able to process their thoughts better and they come up with compact submissions. So between individual papers and group papers, I had to alternate submissions. So I have more time to check those before these ones come in. Ito breather. I'm more relaxed when I do the group submissions. So those were the group submissions last trimester for 255. Compare 255 students organized into groups, and these were their submissions. For my first trimester, and I was telling Jaime over there, your submission is here. Oh. I, when I was looking, when I was looking at the papers, oh my gosh, this is Jaime Kiambao, group paper 1. Jaime Kiambao, group paper 2. And Jaime Kiambao, group paper 3. They're all intact. I did not even know that I was going to see him today. And this was what appeared. Serendipity, no? Anyway, oh yes. We just finished the 5th week of classes for this trimester. And already, these were the student submissions for this trimester. They had their individual papers. I have already corrected all of them, returned all of them. I took screenshots of the papers and I have returned all of these to the students so they know where they are. This weekend, on Saturday, they're supposed to submit another paper to me. But this time, group paper naman. They're going to do their first group paper, due on Saturday. Anyway, I'm preparing, bracing myself for checking again for the next set of papers. I have to print them out on paper. I don't rely on the screen for many reasons. My left eye is not very good. With more than 5 decades of being in the UP classroom, my left eye is telling me, ma'am, your eye is already suffering degeneration. Buti na lang there are vitamins for the eyes pala, ano? So, I'm still managing well. My right eye is perfect. 2020 pa yan, actually. And then, of course, I have to schedule submissions so that I can also have a life. My life is not just checking papers. Anyway, so my fourth way of meeting the challenges, administratively, we could perhaps seriously conduct a research study on how the free tuition policy affected the students' performance. Kasi it's easier to drop courses now eh. You did not pay for the courses naman eh. So drop nyo na lang. You cannot manage it anymore. Let me end by saying that the classroom is a space where teachers and students meet. In UPOU, pandemic or no pandemic, the classroom is a virtual classroom. So, what is the X factor in the virtual classroom? What is this X factor that can guarantee continuing quality online modality? It is at bottom our attitude towards how we teach. And by this, we do not refer to just a mode of delivery of instruction, but how we reach out to our students in our classroom, be it virtual or face-to-face. And it is this X factor that will guarantee continuing quality online modality. Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Thank you very much for your kind attention.